You think black families in 1965 couldn't stretch a dollar into a feast? Think again. African American kitchens created some of the most resourceful and satisfying meals in culinary history when money was tight. Here are 30 poor man's meals that fed families for less than a dollar. Potlikker and cornbread was one of the most economical meals that sustained black families when nothing else seemed possible. The nutrient-rich broth left behind after cooking greens like collards or turnips was never discarded but saved as liquid gold. This dark liquid contained vitamins and the essence of whatever pork seasoning had been used. Families would pour it into bowls and crumble fresh cornbread directly into the warm broth, creating a filling meal from what others threw away. Children grew up sipping pot liquor for strength before school. The cornbread soaked up every drop of flavor, turning a simple combination into something deeply satisfying. For less than 20 cents, this meal could feed an entire household. Pot liquor and cornbread represented the wisdom of wasting nothing. Rice and red beans became a Monday tradition in black households across the South, a dish born from necessity that turned into beloved ritual. Dried red beans were soaked overnight, then simmered slowly with onion, garlic, and whatever smoked meat could be spared, often a ham bone or salt pork. The beans broke down into a creamy stew that clung to every grain of rice. A pound of dried beans cost just pennies and could stretch across multiple meals. The dish was practical for wash day because it required little attention while simmering for hours. Children came home to the smell of beans perfuming the house, knowing dinner would be hearty. The rice absorbed the rich, smoky liquid, creating perfect bites of comfort. Rice and red beans taught families that patience and simple ingredients could create abundance. Neck bones and rice was a dish that transformed one of the cheapest cuts at the butcher counter into something families craved. Pork neck bones were simmered for hours until the meat fell off in tender shreds and the broth turned rich with gelatin. The bones released their flavor slowly, creating a gravy that needed nothing more than salt, pepper, and a bay leaf. Served over white rice, the combination was filling enough to stretch across second helpings. Butchers sold neck bones for just a few cents a pound because others overlooked them. Black families understood the treasure hiding in those bones and made them part of weekly planning. Children learned to gnaw every bit of meat from the bone. The rice soaked up the dark gravy like a sponge. Neck bones and rice proved that humble ingredients could create richness. Fried bologna and eggs was a breakfast that stretched tight budgets while filling hungry bellies before school and work. A single pack of bologna could last an entire week, with thick slices fried in a hot skillet until the edges curled and crisped into savory cups. The rendered fat became the cooking oil for eggs, nothing wasted in a kitchen where every penny mattered. Children loved the way the bologna puffed up in the center and turned golden around the edges. Adults appreciated how quickly the meal came together on rushed mornings. The eggs were cooked any way the family preferred, often scrambled with the drippings stirred right in. A loaf of bread completed the plate, perfect for sopping up runny yolks. Fried bologna and eggs cost less than 50 cents and delivered satisfaction that lasted until lunch. Cornmeal mush with syrup was one of those breakfasts that kept families going when the pantry held little else. Cornmeal was stirred slowly into boiling water with a pinch of salt, cooked until it thickened into a smooth porridge that could fill even the emptiest stomach. The mush was ladled into bowls and drizzled with whatever sweetener was available, usually sorghum or cane syrup. A bag of cornmeal cost almost nothing, and provided dozens of servings, making it the ultimate stretch ingredient. Children ate it hot on cold mornings, the warmth spreading through their bodies before school. Leftover mush was poured into pans, chilled overnight, then sliced and fried crisp the next morning. The fried version was golden outside while staying soft within. Cornmeal mush with syrup proved that simple foods could deliver comfort and nourishment. Bean soup with ham hock was the kind of meal that could feed a crowd on almost nothing, stretching one smoked ham hock into supper for the whole family. Dried navy beans were soaked, then simmered with the ham hock until the meat fell apart and the beans turned creamy. The broth became rich with smoky pork flavor, thickened naturally by the broken down beans. Onion, celery, and potatoes could be added when available, but even without them, the soup satisfied. A single ham hock cost less than a quarter, and dried beans added only pennies more. Families would eat the soup with cornbread for supper, then reheat it the next day when the flavors had deepened. Children often requested seconds, happy to fill their bowls with thick broth. Bean soup with ham hock was economy and flavor working together. Fatback and cabbage was a weeknight staple that turned two of the cheapest ingredients into a meal worth remembering. Fatback, the thick slab of pure pork fat, was sliced and fried until it rendered crispy cracklings and left behind a pool of flavorful grease. A head of cabbage was chopped and added to that same skillet, wilting down in the pork fat until tender and sweet. The dish required nothing more than salt, pepper, and patience, yet it delivered flavor that seemed far more expensive. A head of cabbage cost just pennies, and fatback was among the cheapest meats available. Families stretched this combination across multiple servings, sometimes adding potatoes to make it go further. Children learned to appreciate the way cabbage absorbed that rich pork flavor. Fatback and cabbage was honest food that never pretended to be fancy. Salmon patties with grits was a Friday tradition in many Black households, a meal that felt special despite costing so little. Canned salmon was drained and mixed with egg, flour, onion, and seasonings, then formed into patties and fried until golden brown. The patties developed a crispy crust while staying moist and flaky inside, each bite packed with savory fish flavor. A single can of salmon could make enough patties to feed a family of 4 when served alongside creamy grits. The grits were cooked slowly with butter and salt until smooth, creating a perfect bed for the crispy patties. Together, the meal cost well under $1, yet delivered the protein hard-working families needed. Children often asked for salmon patties by name, looking forward to them all week. Salmon patties with grits proved that budget meals could feel special. Pinto beans and cornbread was the backbone of countless suppers in Black households across the South during the lean years of the 1960s. A bag of dried pinto beans cost less than a dime and could feed a family for 2 or 3 days when cooked properly. The beans were simmered low and slow with salt pork, ham hock, or fatback until they turned creamy and the broth thickened into something almost gravy-like. Cornbread was baked in cast iron, developing a golden crust on the bottom that everyone fought over. The combination of tender beans and warm cornbread provided complete protein, keeping bodies strong through hard work. Families gathered around the table, knowing this meal would fill them completely. The beans tasted even better the next day after the flavors deepened. Pinto beans and cornbread was survival food that tasted like love. Bread pudding from stale bread was the dessert that proved nothing in a Black kitchen ever went to waste, not even the driest heel of a loaf. Stale bread slices were torn into chunks and soaked in a mixture of eggs, milk, sugar, and vanilla until they softened into a custard-like base. Cinnamon and nutmeg were added when available, along with raisins if the budget allowed. The mixture was poured into a baking dish and cooked until the top turned golden and the center set into creamy sweetness. A simple sauce of butter and sugar was sometimes drizzled over the warm pudding, turning humble ingredients into something decadent. Families saved bread throughout the week, knowing stale loaves would become Sunday dessert. Children scraped their bowls clean. Bread pudding from stale bread taught that resourcefulness creates joy. Fried potatoes and onions was supper when nothing else would do, a dish so simple it seemed too plain until the first bite proved otherwise. Potatoes were sliced thin and fried slowly in bacon grease, alongside onions that softened into sweet caramelized ribbons. The edges turned crispy and golden while the centers stayed tender, each piece soaking up the flavor of the fat. A few potatoes and an onion cost almost nothing, yet together they became a meal that satisfied grown men after long days of work. Salt and pepper were the only seasonings needed, though some families added paprika for color. Children ate these straight from the skillet, burning their fingers and not caring. The dish could stretch to feed company by adding another potato to the pan. Fried potatoes and onions was proof that poverty could still produce pleasure. Oxtail stew was Sunday dinner in households where every cut of meat had to work hard for its place on the table. Oxtails were cheap because most shoppers walked right past them, not understanding the treasure hiding in those bony joints. The tails were browned in a heavy pot, then braised for hours with onions, carrots, and potatoes until the meat fell off the bone. The collagen from the bones melted into the broth, creating a gravy so rich it coated the spoon. A pound of oxtails could feed a family when stretched with vegetables and served over rice. The smell of simmering oxtails filled the house all afternoon, building anticipation for the evening meal. Children learned patience waiting for this dish, knowing the reward was worth every hour. Oxtail stew turned what others discarded into something families treasured. Hog maw and potatoes was a dish that required courage to try, but rewarded those who did with deep, satisfying flavor. Hog maw, the stomach lining of a pig, was cleaned thoroughly and simmered until tender before being chopped and cooked with seasoned potatoes. The texture was chewy and substantial, absorbing whatever seasoning surrounded it. Butchers practically gave hog maw away because few customers knew what to do with it. Black families understood its value and transformed it into a filling meal that cost pennies. The potatoes soaked up the porky cooking liquid, becoming rich and flavorful. This dish appeared on tables during holidays and weeknights alike whenever budgets demanded creativity. Children who grew up eating it often craved it as adults. Hog maw and potatoes represented ingenuity, making much from what others ignored. Blackstrap molasses on biscuits was breakfast when sugar was scarce and sweetness still needed to start the day. Blackstrap molasses, the darkest variety, cost far less than honey, yet delivered intense, bittersweet flavor. Hot biscuits were split open and drizzled with the thick, dark syrup that pooled in the soft centers. The combination of buttery biscuit and robust molasses created something humble yet satisfying. A jar of molasses could last weeks, making it one of the most economical sweeteners available. Children learned to love its bold taste, different from the sugary treats they rarely had. The iron in blackstrap molasses also provided nutrition that refined sugar never could. Families spread it on cornbread, stirred it into milk, or ate it by the spoonful. Blackstrap molasses on biscuits was poor food that made mornings rich. Sardines and crackers was the lunch that required no cooking. no preparation beyond opening a tin and a box. Canned sardines packed in oil or mustard sauce were laid across saltine crackers and eaten in quick, satisfying bites. The fish was small and soft-boned, rich with protein that kept workers going through long afternoons. A single tin cost just a few cents and could serve as a complete meal when paired with crackers from the pantry. Children ate them after school, fathers packed them for work, and mothers kept tins stocked for days when cooking was not possible. The flavor was briny and intense, cutting through hunger with efficiency. Hot sauce was sometimes added for those who wanted extra kick. Sardines and crackers was convenience food before that term existed. Sustenance that asked nothing but delivered satisfaction. Smothered chicken gizzards was a dish that turned the parts most cooks threw away into something worth fighting over at the table. Gizzards, the muscular part of a chicken's digestive system, were tough if rushed, but tender when given time. They were cleaned, seasoned, dredged in flour, and browned before being smothered in onion gravy and simmered until fork tender. A pound of gizzards cost almost nothing because they were considered scraps, yet they delivered more flavor than many premium cuts. The gravy thickened as it cooked, becoming rich and savory, perfect for spooning over rice. Children who grew up eating smothered gizzards often preferred them to regular chicken. The dish required patience, but repaid it with deep satisfaction. Smothered chicken gizzards proved that the best parts were often the ones others overlooked. Fried corn and tomatoes was a summer dish that celebrated the garden's abundance when both vegetables ripened at once. Fresh corn was cut from the cob and fried in bacon drippings until the kernels turned golden and caramelized at the edges. Ripe tomatoes were chopped and added to the skillet, their juices mixing with the fat to create a simple but flavorful sauce. The combination was sweet, savory, and bright all at once, requiring nothing more than salt and pepper. Gardens provided both ingredients for free, making this one of the most economical meals of harvest season. Families ate it as a side dish or piled it over rice for a complete supper. The colors were beautiful, red and yellow, mingling in the pan. Fried corn and tomatoes was summer captured in a skillet. Salt pork and greens was the combination that defined Southern Black cooking, a partnership born from necessity that became tradition. Salt pork, cured and preserved without refrigeration, was sliced and rendered in a pot before bunches of collards, turnip greens, or mustard greens were added. The greens cooked down slowly in the salty liquid, absorbing flavor while releasing their vitamins into the broth. A small piece of salt pork could season an enormous pot of greens, feeding the whole family for days. The meat itself was eaten in small pieces, savored for its intense saltiness. Children learned to drink the potlikker left behind, rich with nutrients and flavor. This dish cost almost nothing yet provided sustenance that carried families through hard times. Salt pork and greens was heritage on a plate. Sweet potato hash was breakfast that used yesterday's leftovers to create something worth waking up for. Cooked sweet potatoes were chopped and fried in a skillet with onions until the edges crisp and caramelized while the centers stayed soft. Some families added bits of leftover ham or bacon when available, turning the hash into a heartier dish. The natural sugars in the sweet potatoes created golden, almost candy edges that children especially loved. A few sweet potatoes from the root cellar cost nothing, making this dish pure economy. The hash was served alongside eggs or eaten on its own with coffee. The smell of frying sweet potatoes drew family members to the kitchen before anyone called them. Sweet potato hash was morning comfort that proved leftovers could become something new and delicious. Hoe cakes with molasses was a meal so old it connected families directly to their ancestors who had cooked the same simple cakes generations before. Cornmeal was mixed with water, salt, and a bit of fat to form a thick batter that was fried on a hot griddle or skillet. The cakes developed crispy edges and soft centers, golden brown and fragrant with the smell of toasted corn. Molasses was poured over the hot cakes, pooling in the crevices and soaking into the warm surface. The name came from field workers who once cooked these cakes on the blade of a hoe over open fire. A bag of cornmeal and a jar of molasses could provide dozens of these simple meals. Children ate them for breakfast, lunch, or supper, depending on what else was available. Hoe cakes with molasses carried centuries of survival and tradition in every bite. Chicken feet stew was a dish that made use of what most kitchens threw straight into the garbage without a second thought. The feet were cleaned, scalded, and simmered for hours until the skin turned gelatinous and the broth became rich with collagen. Vegetables like carrots, potatoes, and onions were added to stretch the meal and absorb the deep, savory flavor. A package of chicken feet cost almost nothing at the butcher counter because no one else wanted them. Black families knew the secret hiding in those bony, knobby pieces and turned them into nourishment. The texture was unusual, slippery and tender, but the taste was pure comfort. Children learned to pick the meat carefully from between the tiny bones. Chicken feet stew was proof that what others discarded could become dinner. Cornbread and milk was supper when there was nothing else left in the house but these two simple things. Leftover cornbread was crumbled into a tall glass or bowl, then covered with cold milk until it softened into something between a drink and a meal. The combination was sweet from the corn, tangy from the buttermilk if that was what was used, and surprisingly filling for something so plain. Families ate this on hot summer nights when cooking felt impossible, or on lean days when the pantry had gone bare. Children often requested it as a treat, not realizing it was sometimes the only option. The cornbread soaked up the milk slowly, each spoonful different from the last. This meal cost less than a dime and could quiet a growling stomach. Cornbread and milk was simplicity turned into survival. Pig ear sandwich was a dish that proved nothing from the hog ever went to waste in a black kitchen. The ears were cleaned, boiled until tender, then sliced thin and fried until crispy at the edges. Placed on bread with hot sauce, pickles, and onions, they became a sandwich with remarkable texture and bold flavor. The cartilage softened during cooking, while the outer edges turned golden and crunchy. A whole pig ear cost just a few cents because butchers had no other buyers for them. Families understood the value hiding in these overlooked parts and made them into something satisfying. The sandwiches were messy, flavorful, and filling enough to serve as a complete meal. Children who grew up eating them often craved that unique crunch as adults. Pig ear sandwiches represented the creativity of stretching every resource. Lima beans and rice was a weeknight meal that provided complete protein without requiring any meat at all. Dried lima beans were soaked overnight, then simmered until creamy and soft, their starchy liquid thickening into a natural gravy. Served over rice with salt, pepper, and maybe a splash of hot sauce, the combination was filling and nutritious. A bag of dried limas cost just pennies and could feed a family for several meals when stretched with rice. The beans had a buttery texture that children found easier to love than some other legumes. Adults appreciated how little effort the dish required once the beans were simmering. The meal could be made entirely from pantry staples, requiring no trip to the store. Lima beans and rice was quiet, dependable nourishment that asked almost nothing and gave everything. Fried fish and grits was a breakfast that brought the river straight to the kitchen table. Whatever fish was caught the day before, often catfish, bream, or perch, was cleaned and fried in cornmeal until the coating turned golden and crispy. The fish was served alongside creamy grits, cooked slow with butter and salt, creating a meal that was both hearty and affordable. Families who lived near water caught their own fish, making the protein completely free. Even store-bought fish was cheaper than most meats, stretching the food budget further. The combination of flaky fish and smooth grits satisfied in a way that lighter breakfast never could. Children woke up to the smell of frying fish and knew something good was waiting. Fried fish and grits was a meal that turned modest ingredients into morning abundance. Black-eyed peas and rice was New Year's tradition, but also appeared on tables throughout the year when budgets were tight. The peas were simmered with a ham hock or piece of salt pork until tender, their cooking liquid becoming rich and smoky. Served over rice, the combination was believed to bring luck and prosperity, but it also provided affordable protein and carbohydrates. A bag of dried black-eyed peas cost almost nothing and could stretch across multiple family meals. The peas had a slightly earthy flavor that paired perfectly with the richness of pork fat. Children ate them without complaint, often unaware they were eating survival food disguised as celebration. The dish connected families to tradition while filling their bellies on a budget. Black-eyed peas and rice was hope served in a bowl. Butter beans with smoked neck bones was a dish that turned two inexpensive ingredients into something that tasted far more lavish. The neck bones were simmered for hours until the meat fell off and the broth turned silky with rendered fat and gelatin. Butter beans, also called lima beans, were added to the pot and cooked until they absorbed all that smoky, porky flavor. The result was creamy, rich, and deeply satisfying, perfect over rice or with cornbread. Smoked neck bones cost pennies because most shoppers overlooked them entirely. Butter beans were equally affordable, especially when dried and bought in bulk. Together, they created a meal that could feed a large family for almost nothing. Butter beans with smoked neck bones was poverty cooking at its most delicious. Tomato sandwiches appeared in summer when gardens overflowed with ripe fruit that needed eating before it spoiled. Thick slices of tomato were laid on soft white bread, spread with mayonnaise, then sprinkled with salt and pepper. The juice soaked into the bread, creating something messy and magnificent all at once. Gardens provided the tomatoes for free, and bread and mayonnaise were pantry staples, making the cost almost nothing. Children ate these standing over the sink, juice running down their chins. Adults savored them as a reminder that summer's abundance was a gift. The sandwiches required no cooking, no skill, just ripe tomatoes and the willingness to enjoy simple things. Tomato sandwiches were summer itself, pressed between two slices of bread. Crackling bread was cornbread made richer and more satisfying by adding the crispy bits left behind after rendering. Pork fat. The cracklings were stirred into the cornmeal batter before baking, distributing little pockets of salty, crunchy pork throughout the bread. Each bite delivered the earthy sweetness of corn alongside bursts of savory, fatty richness. Nothing was wasted when hogs were butchered and cracklings were prized for turning plain cornbread into something special. The bread was baked in cast iron until the bottom developed a golden crust that everyone fought over. Families served it alongside beans, greens, or soups, using it to soak up every drop of liquid. Children loved finding the crunchy bits hidden inside each slice. Crackling bread was thrift and flavor combined into one perfect dish. Syrup sandwiches were what mothers made when there was truly nothing else left to feed hungry children. 2 slices of bread was spread with whatever syrup was available, usually cane syrup, sorghum, or even pancake syrup in later years. The sandwich was simple, sweet, and filling enough to quiet growling stomachs until something better could be found. There was no pretense, no attempt to make it fancy, just bread and sweetness pressed together. Children ate them without complaint because they understood, even young, that this was what the family had. The syrup soaked into the bread, making each bite soft and sticky. Mothers served them with love even when shame tried to creep in. Syrup sandwiches were survival distilled to its simplest form, proof that sweetness could exist even in scarcity.
Mustard greens with cornbread was a savory pairing that many families leaned on as a breakfast, though it was eaten at other times of day too. Mustard greens, boiled until tender, were seasoned with bits of pork fat or salt for flavor. Eaten alongside hot cornbread, the meal balanced vitamins with starch, offering both nutrition and energy. It was cheap, filling, and deeply tied to tradition. For children, the bitterness of the greens was often softened by crumbling cornbread into the Potlikker broth, making it more palatable. Adults valued it as a sustaining meal that honored resourcefulness and cultural heritage. Mustard greens with cornbread symbolized strength and survival, representing the kind of food that nourished more than just hunger. It was humble, but it carried families through mornings when resources were thin, but resolve was strong. This dish was one of the quiet backbones of community kitchens, a reflection of endurance and resilience during times of hardship. Fried mullet with hush puppies brought the flavor of coastal mornings to inland tables, celebrating the bounty of southern waters. Fresh mullet fillets were seasoned and lightly dredged in cornmeal before being fried to a crisp golden finish, their mild flesh staying tender and flaky. Alongside the fish, cornmeal hush puppies sizzled in the same hot oil, forming round fritters with a crunchy crust and soft, savory interior. The combination delivered a contrast of textures and tastes that spoke of seaside breakfasts and family gatherings. Some cooks added chopped onions or jalapenos to the hush puppies for an extra kick, while others served lemon wedges to brighten the fish. This meal reminded families of fishing trips, coastal traditions, and the joy of bringing fresh catch straight from net to skillet. Fried mullet with hush puppies honored African-American ties to coastal communities and the creative spirit of cooks who turned fresh seafood and simple cornmeal into a feast worth waking up early for. How cakes with butter and sugar were the sweet breakfast treat that felt almost like dessert, even though they came from the simplest ingredients in the pantry. Made from cornmeal batter poured onto a hot skillet, each cake sizzled as it spread, forming a crisp edge and soft center that tasted perfect every single time grandparents would flip them with practiced ease, stacking them high and spreading butter that melted instantly into the warm surface. A sprinkle of sugar added just enough sweetness to make the hoe cakes feel like a special morning indulgence. They were quick, affordable, and comforting. The kind of food that made children sit down fast and quiet at the table. Hoe cakes were history and home all at once, a dish born from necessity that became a beloved tradition. Even now, the memory of that buttery sweetness lingers in the minds of anyone lucky enough to grow up with them. Sweet potato biscuits brought natural sweetness and a warm orange glow to breakfast plates, showcasing a root vegetable long cherished in African-American kitchens. Mashed cooked sweet potatoes were folded into a dough of flour, butter, and a touch of milk, creating a dough that baked into soft, tender biscuits. The sweet potatoes added moisture and a gentle, earthy flavor, while a hint of cinnamon or nutmeg provided subtle spice. As they baked, the biscuits released a fragrant aroma that signaled a special morning treat. Families served them warm with butter, honey, or cane syrup, turning a simple biscuit into a celebration of the harvest. Sweet potato biscuits captured the creativity of home cooks who used seasonal produce to enrich everyday meals, blending tradition with a touch of sweetness. Their bright color and comforting taste made them a favorite for children and adults alike, proving that wholesome ingredients could create a breakfast that was both nourishing and delightfully indulgent. Lard-fried corn pones were the kind of breakfast that stuck to your ribs and carried you through long hours of work or school. These dense corn patties were mixed from cornmeal, water, and a pinch of salt before being fried golden in sizzling lard. The flavor was simple but deeply satisfying, with the crisp edges giving way to a soft interior that felt hearty in every bite. For families with little to spare, corn pones were portable and cheap, making them an everyday staple as well as a meal to take out into the fields. Children often carried them wrapped in cloth, while adults relied on them with strong coffee to start their mornings. They were versatile too, eaten plain, dipped in molasses, or even crumbled into buttermilk for a different kind of breakfast. Lard-fried corn pones were never fancy, but they were dependable, and that made them unforgettable. They represented resourcefulness and strength, the kind of food that reflected both necessity and comfort in kitchens where nothing went to waste. Banana pecan. Quick bread filled homes with the warm fragrance of ripe fruit and toasted nuts, offering a moist and hearty slice that worked as both breakfast and snack. Overripe bananas were mashed into a batter of flour, butter, and eggs, ensuring natural sweetness and tender texture. Chopped pecans folded through the mixture added a gentle crunch and a rich, nutty flavor that deepened as the loaf baked. Some families added a splash of vanilla or a pinch of cinnamon for extra aroma, while others left the recipe pure and simple. Sliced thick and served warm with a pat of butter, banana pecan quick bread made busy mornings feel a little more indulgent without requiring elaborate preparation. It became a beloved treat in African American kitchens, where thrift and flavor often went hand in hand. This bread proved that everyday ingredients, when combined with care, could produce a breakfast that felt special and comforting, filling kitchens with the scent of love and tradition. Hot water cornbread breakfast cakes were the quick morning version of a beloved staple that had already lived lifetimes in African American kitchens. A bowl of cornmeal mixed with boiling water created a dough that came together almost instantly, proving that good food did not need complicated steps or expensive supplies. Grandparents shaped the dough with their hands, patting each cake gently before laying it into the skillet where it sizzled and tightened into a crisp golden edge. These smaller breakfast cakes were eaten warm, often with a smear of jam, a drizzle of honey, or just a little butter melting across the top. The texture was dense but soft, hearty but still light enough to enjoy early in the morning. It tasted like home, like tradition, like something passed down not through written recipes but through practiced hands that knew exactly how the batter should feel. These cakes made mornings easier, faster, and far more delicious than anyone expected from such simple ingredients. Children loved them because they felt like little treats, bite-sized comforts that fit perfectly into small hands. Adults loved them because they stretched the pantry and kept everyone fed without fuss or cost. Hot water cornbread breakfast cakes were proof that a skillet, some cornmeal, and a steady hand could create something unforgettable day after day. Buttered hominy with bacon brought a smoky, buttery aroma to African American breakfast tables of the 1970s, turning a humble grain into something rich and satisfying. White hominy kernels were simmered until tender, then sautéed in a heavy skillet with generous pats of butter. Crumbled strips of crisp bacon were folded in at the end, their savory fat blending with the buttery corn for layers of flavor. Some cooks added a sprinkle of black pepper or a pinch of red pepper flakes to deepen the taste, while others stirred in chopped green onions for brightness. Served alongside scrambled eggs or spooned over fresh cornbread, it offered hearty comfort that stuck with you through the morning. Buttered hominy with bacon celebrated both farm tradition and kitchen creativity, honoring a food once central to Native American diets and embraced by Southern cooks. Each bite carried the essence of smoky bacon and sweet corn, proving that simple, affordable ingredients could create a breakfast that felt luxurious without being complicated or costly. Pork dripping toast was a breakfast born of thrift, where nothing from a meal ever went unused. After roasting pork, families saved the fat drippings, which cooled and solidified into a spreadable form. Spread over a slice of bread and warmed, it became a quick, filling meal that carried both flavor and energy. Children often ate it before school, while adults grabbed it before heading to long days of work. The taste was rich and salty, a reminder of the meat that provided it even when only fat remained. Pork dripping toast reflected both scarcity and ingenuity, turning something that might otherwise be discarded into sustenance. It was a dish remembered fondly for its practicality, though it spoke clearly of hard times. For many, the memory of pork dripping toast carries with it the smell of the kitchen, the sound of a skillet cooling, and the resourcefulness of families who could not afford to waste a single drop. It was humble, yet deeply tied to survival. Fried cornmeal mush with syrup was one of those breakfasts that quietly carried families through the hardest decades, long before boxed cereal took over the mornings. A pot of mush would be cooked and thickened the night before because nothing could go to waste, and cornmeal was one of the cheapest staples you could rely on. By sunrise, it would be firm enough to slice, each piece hitting the skillet with that gentle hiss that meant breakfast was truly beginning. The outside browned until crisp, while the inside stayed soft, warm, and steady, making every bite feel both hearty and familiar. When syrup was poured over those golden slices, it turned the humble dish into something sweet and comforting, the kind of sweetness that did not need to be fancy to feel special. Grandparents made this because it filled bellies, stretched ingredients, and tasted like something far richer than it really was. Children did not think about thrift or struggle, they just knew it tasted like love served on a plate. Fried mush might look simple today, but its roots run deep in memory, in resilience, in the way older generations held families together one skillet breakfast at a time. Even now, one bite brings back chilly mornings, warm kitchens, and the soft scrape of a metal spatula flipping a slice just right. Brown sugar sweet grits offered a playful twist on the classic savory staple, transforming stone-ground corn into a kid-friendly morning treat. Grits were cooked slowly in milk or water until creamy, then stirred with butter and a generous spoonful of dark brown sugar. The sugar melted into the hot grains, creating a caramel-like sweetness that balanced the subtle corn flavor. Families sometimes added raisins, sliced bananas, or a sprinkle of cinnamon for extra indulgence, while others enjoyed the simple pairing of butter and sugar alone. This sweet version of grits became popular in households where children preferred a hint of dessert for breakfast, yet adults appreciated its nourishing heartiness. Brown sugar sweet grits demonstrated how one ingredient could shift from savory to sweet with a few thoughtful touches, proving that a Southern classic could adapt to changing tastes while staying rooted in tradition and comfort. Each steaming bowl brought smiles to the table and warmth that lingered long after the meal. Salted fish cakes for breakfast carried a flavor that was bold, practical, and tied to tradition. Families made them by mixing scraps of salted fish with meal or leftover potatoes, shaping patties, and frying them crisp in a skillet. The result was savory, filling, and inexpensive, making it a reliable protein source when other meats were far out of reach. In coastal communities or areas where salted fish was a common trade, this dish became a morning standard, paired often with eggs if the household could spare them. Children sometimes found the taste strong, but adults appreciated its sustenance and the way it stretched simple ingredients. Fish cakes often carried the memory of family gatherings, with parents teaching children how to prepare them just as their parents once had. It was a dish that reflected survival, thrift, and culinary creativity, embodying how overlooked scraps could become the backbone of a morning meal. Salted fish cakes for breakfast held both history and hunger in balance, fueling resilience through humble bites. Stewed apples over grits was the quiet morning comfort many families turned to when fresh fruit was limited, but preserved apples were always within reach. Grandparents would slice apples thin and let them simmer with sugar or syrup until they softened into a fragrant golden mixture that tasted like fall in every season. Meanwhile, a pot of grits bubbled on the stove, thickening slowly as it absorbed the heat. When the stewed apples were spooned over the top, the contrast of creamy grits and sweet fruit felt like a small luxury. It was warm, filling, and gentle, the kind of breakfast that soothed the stomach and the spirit. Some families added cinnamon, others added butter, but most kept it simple because the apples were already sweet enough. This dish was a reminder of home orchards, backyard trees, and jars of preserves lined up on pantry shelves. It tasted like patience and tradition, like the kind of mornings where time moved slower. Even today, stewed apples over grits feels like a forgotten treasure from a quieter time.
Which of these meals did your family make? Drop your memory in the comments, hit like, and subscribe for more forgotten recipes from Black kitchens.